Item number, call to order the November 6th Shakopee City Council meeting. Item number 1 is call to order. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Delaney?
Here.
Councilmember Whiting? Here. Councilmember Contreras?
Here.
Councilmember Lara?
Here.
Mayor Lehman?
Here. Item number 3, Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 4 is a special presentation in recognition of Show Off Shakopee winners. Amanda McKnight, our communications manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and all of our guests. I always love presenting our Show Off Shakopee photo contest winners. We get a lot of great submissions. This year, we had more than the last 2 years, and so there was a lot of great options for us. So I've actually included our finalists for you to see as well, and then of course we have our winners in attendance tonight to receive a framed copy of their photo. So first we've got our finalists for the Uniquely Shakopee category. We had this photo from Brian Olson, and this one from John Goltz. And then our winner of this category is Debanjana Chatterjee with A Tunnel Full of Life. You can come on up to grab your frame.
That is pretty nice.
And this is exactly what we were looking for, by the way, with this category, like something that screams, like you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, that's in Shakopee, so well done on that. Next, we have our Community Connections finalists. We have this photo by Billy Daniels, and this one by Aniket Nagdev. And then our winner is Billy Daniels with The Toss-Up. Next up, our wildlife and nature category. Anytime we do anything outdoors related, this is definitely our highest submission category. So our finalists were this really cool photo by Riley Connell, some Northern Lights by Daniel Clark, and this photo by Isabel Soloninka. And then our winner is Chris Loisel with Sunset over Ridge Creek Park. Okay, this year we did a new category altogether, like a new concept that we've never done before, and we had a category for photographers age 17 and younger. So these were our finalists in that category. This is from Mila Lauchko. This one's from Judah Berry. And Judah was also our winning submission with Fields of Home. All right, lastly, we've got our grand prize winner. So when we look at all the submissions, we pick our grand prize winner first and then kind of go from there. So this year we have Powdered Madness, Fans in the Moment by John Goltz. And if you look at this photo up close, it is like a Renaissance painting. It is very fun to look at. You can come on up, John. Now I'm going to have City Council come down in front of the dais, and we'll get the winners in with you, and we'll take a quick picture. Huh? You got to take a picture of the pictures, you know? but I'm doing it with my phone. All right, so I don't know if we can bring you guys, we'll intersperse you. So like, if you want to go like every other, we'll get council, winner. Then you come like, here we go. Can we scoot just a little bit? You can scoot in, John, you're good. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thank
You cannot submit this photo for next year's contest.
Winner. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Oh, yes.
1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks to all our winners for coming tonight and for their submissions.
I was going to ask, very nice photos, but I do believe that the finalists in each category and the big winner all get displayed at City Hall, is that correct?
The winners of each category are on the
Yes.
wall
And
directly
the wall's over
behind
here
us.
for 1
Yep.
year, I guess?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, thank you folks for participating. That was kind of cool. Item number 5, approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff or council?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Council? Contreras?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Delaney, discussion on the motion? Discussion? Nope. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 6, consent agenda. Any changes to the consent agenda?
Not from staff, sir.
So
Nothing for me.
I'll be removing 6D.
I'm sorry, sir, that was 6D?
6D.
Delta? Thank you.
Delta, yep. All right, anything else? Wishes of council? Mr. Lara,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Contreras, any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, now I gotta get my bearings going here and sort through
Mayor?
my. Yes.
Would we like the consent agenda items read?
And while I do that, Mr. Lara will have staff read the consent agenda for the audience. How's that sound? Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, these are consent agenda items for Wednesday, November 6th of 2024. 6A purchases 3 administrative vehicles, purchases 4 skid steer loaders, and an electric pickup truck. 6B is a surplus property designation in the police department. 6C is no parking zone for Greenwood Court East. 6E is the Minnesota Department of Transportation's Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act Discretionary Match Program Grant Award. 6F is Minnesota's DNR Conservation Partners Legacy Expedited Projects Grant Application. 6G approves a THC license for Pawn Exchange LLC. 6H approves a 3.2 on-sale wine and Sunday liquor license for Las Brazas LLC, doing business as El Fagon. 6I is a feasibility report and a calling for a public hearing for the 2025 full-depth pavement reconstruction project. 6J is a feasibility report and calling for a public hearing for the Stagecoach Road Improvement Project. 6K is an intergovernmental cooperative agreement with the SMSC for the maintenance of 160th Street west of CSAH 17. 6L is a construction cooperative agreement for County Highway 78 and Zumbro Avenue pedestrian underpass. 6M is a change order for additional soil for Memorial Park for seating areas. 6N is a change order for Loeffler for Windmere Neighborhood Park for weather delays. 6O is a Parks and Recreation staffing reorganization in the Park and Rec Department. 6P is a 2024-25 snow removal locations for sidewalks and trails approval. 6Q is a donation of surface water rescue equipment from the Hennepin County Water Patrol. And 6R is a memorandum of understanding with the City of Hopkins for participation on the Hopkins Chemical Assessment Team.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We did have a motion and a second and approval. We'll move on to item number 7, public comment. If there's somebody in the audience that would like to address.
Did we vote?
We voted.
Okay.
Yep. If there's somebody in the audience that would like to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda, now would be the time to do that. So if you're here to speak to the city council on something that is not on our agenda, you're free to step up to the table here, and would love to hear from you. Anybody? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8, business removed from consent. I removed 6D, the capital improvement plan. And the reason I removed it is there's the projects for the culture corridor and the Schroeder House. I've tried for 2 years now to try to have the council take a look at the overall cost of some of these projects and try to scale it back a little bit, where we still get the projects done, but at a smaller cost. One of the things that came to my mind was, and I'm just going to use this as an example, if we take the Schrader House, is it Schrader or Schroeder?
Schrader.
Schrader House. That's right now valued at roughly $200,000, and fix it all up and put, $1.5 million into it. What does that do to our future outlay of, we tend to squirrel money away into a building fund, a park asset fund each year from the general levy for when these buildings or items need to be fixed, repaired, replaced. And, what does that do when we increase the value of something like that by putting so much money into it to what our needs are yearly in a general tax levy to support the future upkeep, maintenance, and replacement cost? I guess I don't know the answer to that. I was hoping that we could have a larger discussion on scaling back some of these projects. I know that members of council have passions for some of these things, and I can totally respect that. And I certainly respect, the majority of council's wishes to move forward on various projects. But at the same time, I'd like my concerns to be respected a little bit too, where my concerns are the pocketbooks of the taxpayers. And, we're doing a lot of spending, and there's cost to that, to the general levy. So just my 2 cents. Mr. Whiting?
I see this as a little different, as investing in the future and finally turning around and facing the river like many citizens and many committees and many years of input has directed us in that direction. So with that, I'd make a motion to approve the 2025 to 2029 capital improvement plan.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Discussion on the motion. Mr. Lara?
I do have a question for staff, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
When does this so if we vote on this project, is there any discussion on that? Will we be able to have any discussion on this? Because this will come back to us later.
Right.
Yeah, this is a plan, and so essentially what it is, it's dependent on many things, including ensuring that we have all the funding in place to make it happen. But regardless of what the plan itself says, all of these projects come back in front of council for a full discussion. And that certainly is an appropriate time to talk about costs and other things as well, and modification of the plans as they are in place now. So there's always opportunity for council to make changes as we move forward to any project.
Okay, so Mayor Lehman will have his opportunity to address his concerns at that time.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you. Well, just one point. I know that we can address that specific on each project. The underlying issue that won't be discussed is, we should be looking at this capital improvement project more in-depth in all areas to try to, we just saw an exercise by engineering staff to go through the road infrastructure and stuff and really take a hard look at pavement statuses and life expectancies and things like that. Some were raised, some were lowered. It's a good exercise, to be honest with you, so. Mr. Whiting?
No, I don't say that there's not an opportunity to shave this down and save some things, but there's also grant money tied to some of these projects that we have to pony up our portion of it, and throwing away, it's not free money, but it's our tax money, but it's our tax money finally. We're not giving it to the government. It's coming back to Shakopee for a change. That's a rare thing. I'd like to invest in that.
One of the examples I would point out is we've got multiple partners involved in the cultural corridor. Are these partners dedicated partners that are going to participate in putting money into a fund for future replacement and maintenance on these items?
I think most can't.
Why not? They can participate in other ways? But
Absolutely.
So they're partners to spend it, but not to maintain it. At any rate, any other comments? Ms. Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess when I look at this, right, it's to me, and maybe I don't explain it or don't give the correct example, but to me, it's like a wish list, right? It's a wish list that we get of what needs to be done. Like we wish to do this, tons of stuff. But if we don't have, again, those monies, those funds, we won't do them. We'll get the opportunity to see when, X, Y, and Z project come to us, and then we can say, hey, we'd like to, scale it back, like you said. But my worry is because it's all bundled up in one, because we don't like one or two projects, we will say no to the whole project, like the whole bundle, the whole entire CIP.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, because of one or two things that, personally, we want to scale back or whatever reason we have, because, we can do that. But it's just like, should we, I guess my question is, should we always say no to the CIP because of one or two projects that eventually we will get back? And see them and then ask to, work together as a team and try to scale it back? Mm-hmm. Or should we just say no every time we see the CIP? I don't know. It's just, it always makes me think, right? It's not, it's just like.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
The document itself says that anything that's scheduled in 2025, once adopted, will be put into the 2025 budget.
Right.
So that's where we're at.
Okay.
Okay? Mr. Delaney?
I was going to say, when I look at the CIP, I think we should include the scope when we talk about scale. I mean, I look at some of these projects, and here specifically Park. I think we got great parks, but also I think, again, I'm going to say that some of them are sort of lofty. I keep coming back to the $2 million worth of signs. I think I even heard from residents when I was talking to them, they were also concerned about that. So,
And I think those are valid, all of the comments. I think the reality is that we went through on the cultural trail, about an 8-year planning process. And that started on the backs of our original Park and Rec trail, our comprehensive plan, award-winning comprehensive plan, by the way. And then our Park and Rec trail, award-winning Park and Rec trail, by the way. And we then moved forward and then started working with partners on this. So this, and on both of those award-winning plans, we've got those awards in great respect for the amount of public input that we did into those projects. And, you're always going to have some people that don't like something. And you're also going to have people that love things. And our ultimate responsibility is to try to find that balance and move forward things that make sense and that we can sustain to the mayor's comments. And we need to make sure that we have funds put away to be able to make sure that we upkeep anything that we are doing. So I'm comfortable where we are. One of the things I heard about the last election that was being discussed was the concern that we were growing too fast and, that we weren't really putting a lot of attention to some of the things that we were building and how the city as a whole was growing. And, I couldn't disagree more with that. We have spent a lot of time, a lot of planning, and in this one particular project, the Cultural Trail, literally 8 years of planning. So, you know, when it does ultimately come in front of council, we can have those discussions, and if you want to scale it back, then certainly that's exactly what we'll do.
Anybody else? Mr. Lara?
Someone just mentioned that whatever we adopt tonight will go into that's on the 2025 line, goes on to the budget. But I'm just curious, what would happen to those funds? Let's say it gets approved, and then we end up, when this project comes forward to us and we end up scaling it back, what happens to those leftover funds?
Those funds will then return to the general fund at the end of the year, and then ultimately all leftover funds, as every year, come to council, and the council makes a determination what to do with those funds.
Well,
Except for the grants.
it depends on the fund.
That is true.
It may be a park
Yes, sir.
reserve fund, and in that case, it would specifically go back to that fund.
That's correct. You're right, absolutely.
All right.
But anything that is not in a particular fund would then come back to council for an allocation at the end of the year.
And then projections for what would be needed for yearly tax levy to support the ongoing maintenance cost and, you know, replacement and whatever, would be adjusted based on what the final product is.
That's correct, yes, sir.
All right. We all up?
Yes,
Clerk?
done.
Any other discussion?
No.
We do have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
I thank you, council. I do plan on trying to scale some of that back. All right, where are we at here? We are at item number 9. Recess for an Economic Development Authority meeting. A motion would be in order. Mr. Lara?
I'll make that motion to adjourn to the recess to the Economic
Recess.
Development Authority meeting.
Second.
Motion by Lara Whiting. Discussion on the motion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're opposed. We're in recess for EDA.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting to order. Staff, if you would please make note of the roll. That would be number 1. Number 2 is approval of agenda. We don't really have an agenda. Number 3, consent business. Don't have much either. We don't have any. Number 4, general business. On there, we have the approval lease modification with Haven for additional space at the River City Center. I think Mr. Kursky. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and board members. So this is the space that Jiu-Jitsu was in. The Haven is directly to the east of them. They've had a need to expand. They've been looking at other locations, and when this became available, they approached us and asked if they could expand into that space. It won't require much in the way of improvements because the building was just renovated, and Jiu-Jitsu had renovated the space recently. They moved out to a much larger space. So I think people in the building will be happy because one of the biggest complaints was they made a lot of noise with bodies being slammed into the floor and walls. So I think this will be a much quieter use for them.
So just going.
And we're also adjusting, they're one of the leftover leases from the former owners, and they had CAM and other things that's been very difficult for us to keep up with finance and the tenants. So what we've done is going to a gross lease, which is what everybody else has there. So a slight increase in their rent to basically cover any operating costs.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Going through my notes really quick, they have 24 years as a tenant, currently growing and have identified the need for expansion. So that's what they're doing, and they are in good standing and have paid without any issues. So, commissioners, what are you guys thinking? Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve entering into a new lease for the Haven.
Go ahead, sir.
I'll make a
Oh, you're
second.
second? Okay,
Yep.
so we have Commissioner Lara as a motion, and our second by Commissioner Lehman.
Madam
Yes, sir.
President, I have a question. Been there since December 2000.
Yep.
That building was built in 98, 99, so they must have been there right away at the very beginning, huh?
Madam Chairwoman and members, yes, they've been a long-term tenant. They've moved several times within the building because they've grown. If you remember, we approved a new lease because the owner of this business passed away and a new company bought them. So they're kind of in an expansion mode, and they've been pretty successful.
Perfect, thank you. Does that answer your question? Yes. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr.
Kursky?
Kursky, sorry. And number 5, we have the EDA bill list.
I just had one quick question.
Go ahead, yep.
Is the PGAT Real Estate Services Fuller facade, is that expense for the facade improvement program match? I'm guessing it is.
Mayor, correct.
Ladies. So that was that. Now we are on number 6. Anyone? Go ahead, Mr. Delaney.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 at 7 p.m.
Second?
Second?
Perfect. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll reconvene the Shakopee City Council meeting. Takes us to item number 11, general business, 12, workshop, 12A, cannabis licensing ordinance discussion. And I'll just remind council that this is a workshop setting, so we're going to be less formal in our discussion on this. That tends to bring up the better questions and answers and discussion points.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and as always, feel free to interrupt at any time. This is a workshop. The whole point is to try to garner your intention, so where we want to go. As we look at this, just a little history, as you know, the adult use cannabis was legalized in 2023. We've done some work on this in the past. We've held a couple different workshops as we've been trying to construct not only initially our THC ordinance when it first came out, and now we also had put together some information as we were waiting for the state to determine what the ultimate direction was going to be. And so now that we have a pretty good idea, we still don't know everything, just so you know. We have some open questions, but you know, now it's time to start figuring out where you want to go with this as a whole, as a council. So Minnesota Statutes Chapter 342 established the State Office of Cannabis Management, which is the ultimate licensing authority. They're the ones that are going to give the licenses. That does not mean that we don't have a voice. We do. We have limited control on some aspects over the business. It's important to understand that we can't essentially enact a de facto ban by making so many limitations that a business couldn't survive here. And we can't, I'm sorry, we can have establish a maximum buffer for different uses. We will have to do some amendments to our zoning ordinance and also our THC ordinance, as I mentioned before. And it's a part of that, and we had some questions earlier today as I was talking with the attorney who's going to help us through this, is that, you know, there's a portion of what it appears to in the handbook that the state has put out. It says that there can't be public consumption. You can only have consumption on private property or business. We're not sure that that's as clear as what it states in the handbook, and so that's one of those things that we'll have to figure out as well. So we can essentially going to go through and talk in this slide about all the different areas, and then we're going to dive in deep, a little deeper in each one. So cities can generally decide the following, again, within those overarching state guidelines. The designation of zoning districts for each cannabis business type, the establishment of buffer zones that can be between cannabis businesses and other areas of concern such as schools, daycares, et cetera, and between cannabis businesses and other cannabis businesses. We can also talk about registration, and that can be either city or county. We actually have that option of basically giving it to the county and say, you handle all of our registration for us. Now, if they were to do that, they would get the registration fees, and they'd also be in charge of doing the compliance checks.
Should we take a couple of those in order? I mean,
Yeah, we'll,
You gonna do that? Okay.
yeah, we're going to dive deeper in each one of these next. We can determine limitations on any of the number of retailers beyond the statutorily required numbers that we have, limits on hours of operation, and any additional requirements for temporary cannabis events. So now we're going to dive a little deeper. Yes, sir.
Anybody have any questions on that page?
I still have not, I'm not sure if I have my question answered about our current policy on compliance checks. If a establishment fails a compliance check and is selling to minors, do we still, under the new Minnesota laws, have the right to not issue them a permit?
We do not have that right.
I have the same kind of question because
Yeah.
my mind, when I read all of this, was, first of all, we talked about allowing it within parks a certain distance away from
Yes,
kids
sir.
playing and
Yeah.
stuff, and that is according to what I understand now to be in violation of state statute.
We're not quite sure on that yet.
Well, consumption in public,
Yeah.
if it's in a park,
Yeah.
if it's not allowed in state statute, that means consumption in a park would not be allowed under state statute.
Yes, sir, and the attorney and I had that discussion before, and you know, if you want to kind of,
Absolutely. So the Office of Cannabis Management made that statement, consumption not allowed in public. That is not, as I read the statute, explicitly said. There's a list of 3 places where you always will be able to consume, and then there's a list of about 7 or 8 places where you're never going to be able to consume. The public, and public parks are not in either of those lists.
Okay. All right, so the person from the office misspoke. Or weren't clear in it.
If you could, I think there's an interpretation where you could say consumption isn't allowed in public. However, if you do interpret the statute that way, there's no penalty associated with it.
right.
So it would be kind of like flag code, where you're not supposed to do certain things, but there's no teeth associated with it.
Okay, and then another question that I had, if the county was to do all this, would they decide then how many to allow in the city? Would that be their jurisdiction or ours if we give that to them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely, no, this is a common question. The way that the statute is written is it says the unit of local government that is issuing the registrations can put a cap. So I've interpreted that to say, if the county is issuing the registrations, they have the ability to put that cap on the number of registrations they're issuing. That's
Okay.
not to say that if you delegate or consent it to the county and then you ask them to put that cap in, that they would or wouldn't. But if you want to ensure you have the ability to set that cap, then keeping it within your purview is the way to do it.
And the last question I have on this screen was the distance buffer zones. I thought I read in the state statute that they already have in the state statute a buffer zone from schools of a certain distance. I thought it said 1,000 feet.
That's correct. So then the statute provides that cities can choose to enact buffers from cannabis businesses up to 1,000 feet from a school, 500 feet from a daycare, residential treatment facility, or feature in a park that is an attraction to minors. You don't have to have those maximum buffers. And the only other thing I'll say on this point, recognizing that I'm interrupting you.
No, that's fine.
Okay, great, is the cannabis business to cannabis business buffer that's considered here is not in statute, but in the OCM model, they imply or provide that you could consider buffers between 2 cannabis businesses, but it's not
Okay.
explicitly in statute.
I'm not clear on this point because the way I thought I read it, let me try it this way. If we don't adopt a buffer for schools, a business, providing it's in the right zoning, would be allowed to be located next to a school?
A cannabis business, yes. The thing that I'm hedging on is I know that there's a separate statutory scheme for current medical marijuana businesses that also has some type of buffer in it, and I don't know the contents of that, so that could have been what you're referring to as well. That's in a
Okay.
different.
I thought the statute was saying that you have to be a 1,000 feet away from.
No, that's actually the maximum.
Maximum.
And that's if you decide that.
Right.
You can have 50 feet, but if you're going to do it, that's the maximum it can be.
Okay,
Zone it out by 10,000 feet.
all right, continue, carry on.
So the city can amend the code to either allow each type of business in a particular district or to allow cannabis businesses in zones with similar uses. And that's much like if it's a retailer, it'll be a retail zone. If it's an agriculture growth, it'd be an agricultural zone. Many cities do choose to zone cannabis retailers similar to tobacco and liquor stores, and there's a couple pieces of information that I have in front of you. First of all is the staff has put together a proposed zoning code amendment, and then also the cannabis ordinance summary of other cities similar to ours and what they've already done, just to give you some feel as to what others are doing. There are a multitude of business types, and luckily, OCM will be the ones that have to determine which one of those would be licenses, and you can see a list of all of those that are there.
Okay, back up, one more question on that last slide.
Yes, sir.
Under all these different business types, from retail to cultivator, transporter, blah, 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 they're all licensed by the state, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If we're going to have a retail operation, we can permit them, right?
We do permit them,
Okay.
correct.
Do we permit any of these other types, like the transporter or micro, meso business, testing?
I will defer.
I'll say, I usually describe it this way. There's two touch points that the city will have on certain types of cannabis businesses. The first touch point is during the licensing process. So if I wanted to be a cannabis cultivator, I would go to the state and apply for my license. I would have a location in mind, and as I'm applying for the license, the state will contact the city and confirm that that location meets zoning requirements. In one of these drafts that you'll see, that's called the pre-license zoning certification. And that applies to all cannabis businesses. Cultivators, delivery, meso, micro, every single one. Once the businesses get their license, if you are a business selling products to the public as a retailer, and one of these combination businesses with a retail endorsement, or a lower potency hemp edible retailer, you will have to register with the city, and that registration process is very similar to, we structure it kind of like tobacco or liquor. However, your ability to do things is much more limited because you're not the licensing authority.
Okay, a transporter, and there was one other in the transporting, delivery, I think they called it.
Yep.
Okay, let's say they operate out of their business operates out of their home in City X, but they're only serving this area. How do they put down to the city where their location is when they don't have one?
Great question. So the one delivery businesses are ones that would be delivering to consumers. Transporters are B2B, business-to-business delivery. This is more like a Brinks truck as opposed to maybe a van or a car with a locked compartment. The delivery service they don't have to register.
With the state or with the city?
With the city. Their zoning compliance, though, would be at their home base. So if it is in Shakopee, they would have to do the zoning check with Shakopee. However, delivery service businesses could be, I describe them as, they could be like Domino's, or they could be like DoorDash. You could have a retail business that also has a delivery license, or you could just have a standalone delivery business.
Somebody with a home occupation license taking their car and delivering around town,
So one of the,
which is okay, but
yeah, there is a prohibition in the statute on, and it's strangely worded, but it basically says, if the activity you're doing is something you can only do because you have a cannabis business license. It cannot be done from your dwelling.
Okay.
So we've tried to simplify that in our proposals and say, cannabis businesses are not home occupations.
Okay.
So there's
So
no
they would
residential
they would have a
on here.
location per
Yes.
se.
I know that wasn't exactly your question, but it just,
Okay.
And no residential zoning on this list, on
Unless,
this
unless
proposed
we
list.
allowed that in, that specific use to be in residential, but,
I see, yeah.
all right. All right, sorry.
Cannabis business has to comply with all the other zoning requirements of the city, other than the ones that specifically are dealing with it itself. It requires a security plan with surveillance and security measures on site. And so ultimately, the first question for us to kind of discuss is, do we designate a cannabis zoning district? In other words, these will be particular areas where cannabis will be allowed to be in, or do we just allow our typical zoning to control based upon the type of business it is?
My opinion is it's easier to manage if we just use our own zoning maps. You know, a retailer goes into a retail zone or business zone, if it's an allowable use. And kind of like you have in your proposed here, I don't see any concerns with that.
I'm looking at it like alcohol. You know, alcohol is, what's the word? Altering,
Yeah,
right?
Yep.
Cannabis, altering. Wherever we allow in zoning for alcohol to be sold or consumed or whatever is where, you know, so we're to the zoning like you're
Right.
thinking. And I would think, like you already have, like staff already has, is if you're gonna be growing indoors, you'd want to be in like an industrial area where, you know, you're not so concerned about some of the smells and stuff because you're in the right area for that, where you have other uses that also have them kind of heavy uses.
OSHA would make sure you had the air.
Yep.
Transfer
And, you know, if you're growing it or whatever outdoors, you probably want to be in the agricultural area
Do they have
somewhere.
outdoor, would that even be something for
I don't,
Minnesota?
I don't know. I don't know.
Beta seed.
But I'm just saying, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, same as like alcohol. And then that's kind of why I asked the other questions. Okay, so let's walk through a scenario. Somebody comes in, they're going to be a retailer. They're in a business location, commercial location. They get their license, they get their permit. We decide we're going to do the underage checks, compliance checks like we do with tobacco and alcohol already. Then can we apply the penalty for sale to a minor under our existing policy and add THC to that like we do alcohol and tobacco? I'd mirror the alcohol penalties.
I don't believe we can do that.
I was going to
And
say,
the reason I'm asking this, and this might be for your department, is because currently under our alcohol, you know, your first offense is this much of a fine, 1-day suspension, suspended if you don't get another one in a certain period of time. And it progressively gets to the point, like fourth time, you lose your license to operate. Since we don't do the licensing and only, can we take their permit? Does that affect them?
So the way that we, you know, we generally propose structuring these is kind of in two parts. To directly answer your question, it's unlikely that you'll be able to exactly mirror tobacco or alcohol. The sort of license sanctions are imposed by the Office of Cannabis Management. What the city does have the authority to do is, you know, you fail a compliance check, it must be reported to the OCM, and then they should have standards that would say you fail X number of compliance checks, this is the penalty. I don't know what those are at this point. You can also, as a city, if it's a situation that poses an imminent threat to health and safety or the public, you can immediately suspend their license, they stop operating. If it's sort of bad but not an imminent threat, you can tell them you're going to suspend their registration, hold a hearing, report it to the OCM, have a little longer timeline. So that's kind of the licensing options. The way that we're also structuring these at this point, until we're sort of told we can't, is making any violation of the ordinance related to these businesses as just a code violation as well, so you can sort of, does Shakopee have administrative citations? I should know that. Yeah, so you could, it's a violation of the city code, you could impose an administrative penalty.
Which is what we do for our alcohol and tobacco violations.
It just
So
might
we,
not be able to.
so we can do that.
At this point, we think so.
The thing is, that I would be more concerned with this low potency hemp edible or retailers to getting them to the minors than I would the dispensaries. From what I've read, that you can't even get through the door without being carded and licensed and put in the system.
Well, you're not supposed to be able to get a bottle of Jack Daniels at 16 either, so.
It's like security, evidently, you can't get past the door, the way I've read it.
Well, are they mandated to do that?
Yeah,
Just like the alcohol and tobacco sales
Well,
are
you're
mandated
right.
to read a driver's license
right.
and check your ID?
I'm just
And
saying,
we've never-
I just think that it'll be harder.
We've never had any violations because everybody does that
Well, the
perfect.
retail situations is a little different than the dispensary, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, if they're caught selling to minors, they need to be penalized.
Yeah.
And we do it to alcohol, we do it to tobacco, and it should be treated the same. And I lean more toward making it like the alcohol because alcohol is altering and so is THC. Tobacco, it may not be altering physically and but it has obvious health impacts.
I think we're on the same track. I think we just have limitations with the state's law.
Right.
So do we generally agree then that we'll basically, depending on the business, we'll plug them into our current zoning code?
I think
Yeah,
that would
retailer
be-
to retailer.
Retail will go to
Business would
retail,
work, business-
ag will go to ag.
This would probably fit.
I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
It's
Oh, I'm sorry.
Joe Saffy with Kennedy and Graven.
Joe, so is this going to be treated like tobacco that you can't use it indoors? Like can someone like open up just like how we have breweries where people consume it inside?
Yes, so you can, the Clean Indoor Air Act applies to smoking of any of these products, but where on-site consumption is allowed, you could be consuming, the two examples are, there's one set of retailer, it's the micro business retailer that could have a designated area, which you could essentially have as what some folks are calling a cannabis lounge, where it could be on-site consumption at the micro business, and that would be for cannabis products. For lower potency hemp edibles, those are the currently available products for the most part. And, you can serve those as breweries, bars, or anything like that. So those are the two situations where you could have on-site consumption.
Because
The on-site consumption is a different licensing process, isn't it?
For lower potency hemp edibles, I believe that it comes with the license, but for micro businesses, there's a specific, it's called an endorsement, that you would have to get to be able to, and that's generally, yes, a different licensing process.
It's kind of like the cigar shop where you can go into that back room area and,
yeah, I was
Have a
just gonna
cigar.
I was gonna bring that up. I'm like, we have, because I know you can go do that.
and then larger events that they have, that's another licensing area, and that has to go into your zoning controls too, I believe.
Yep, and we'll touch on that next.
Okay.
So are we all in agreement that we don't want the county to do this?
Yeah. Well, that's coming up as well.
Right.
Do you have any questions of what our thought processes is?
No, I just wanted to clarify, so we're looking at it from the context of business use, and it'll plug into where, at this point, that's, I believe, where everyone is. Yes, sir.
The one thing I wanted to clarify and ask is, so cannabis micro businesses and meso businesses are, and maybe you're talking about this later and I'm jumping ahead. Essentially, under the statute, there's a prohibition on vertical integration between kind of the three major things. So you can't have a cultivation license, a manufacturing license, and a retail license with kind of three exceptions. A micro business can, and a meso business can, and those are just capped, their production is capped. So it's essentially saying if you're going to be a smaller time producer, we're going to allow you to own all three levels of production. Some cities have said, So generally, I'd say, think about those in their component parts when you're zoning. So you zone retail, you zone manufacturing, and you zone cultivation as cultivation. However, if you want to allow one of those businesses to co-locate all three, you would want to identify a zoning district in which you would essentially be making an exception to allow a retail component.
Can we currently, I'm sorry, can we currently do that in our industrial? If we can basically combine production, sale, and use?
But before we get to answering that, because I think there's a key point to this, micro and what was the other one?
Mezzo?
What's the difference?
Yes, great question. It's the size. So micro is smaller, they can have one retail location. Mezzo allows more grow space, more manufacturing space, and they can operate 3 retail locations, but not all in the same city.
Okay, so the micro one, what I'm thinking would be what Councilor Lara was saying, where somebody's got a permission to have a small cultivating, probably on site, right?
Could be, yeah. Yeah.
And people would be able to use it there in a certain area, and they'd be able to retail it. Okay? So it'd be like this is a cigar shop, basically.
If you choose to allow that.
Except the stuff would be grown there.
Yeah, you don't have to allow that combination. You can say, as we read this now, again, we're sailing the ship as it's being built. You could say, all of those individual zoning, you have to meet all zoning requirements, so you can only have cultivation over here, only manufacturing over here, and only retail over here. But if you as the city say, we want to allow this sort of combination in a zoning district, it would just be good to designate that.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, and so if we're going to be looking at it like alcohol, think of it as like a brewery where they're making the beer there. You can sell it or buy it off sale, and then you can consume it there. So if we're, if we're going to allow it for them,
So, I mean, so we can,
Be on a micro scale.
on a micro, yeah.
so we can allow that in our industrial.
So Mayor and Council, prior to some changes in state law and in our zoning, microbreweries like Badger Hill were in industrial areas where they had production, they had basically a lounge where you could drink their beer, and you could get beer to go. So when we looked at this, the micro businesses would be permitted in B1, B3, major rec, and then community commercial in I1 and I2, so that would be very similar to what we have for
The brew hall.
microbreweries.
Okay.
We did limit the mezzo businesses just I1 and I2.
Did you say eliminate?
We only allowed them in I1 and I2.
Okay. All right. Jay, do you have something?
Well, the same question about the brewery, yeah. We already covered it.
No, I think, I was thinking more of an industrial or agricultural spot, and I'm thinking, right out by your property, by the hospital there, that's agricultural right there, and that's, but it's right in town too, so.
But that would be for a grower cultivator.
But the combination business we were talking about.
Yeah, you can't have the retail business and an egg. It'd have to be zoned for business use or whatever else the business side of it says it has to be.
Yeah,
zoned
it couldn't
for.
be ag, yeah, that's true. But
So the only place a mezzo could go, a large outfit that wanted to cultivate a larger amount, offer it for retail, and have people consumption, would have to be in I1 or I2.
I'm thinking like the wineries and things that have they're growing the product right there and selling it.
Well, I think the better example was Councilor Lara's brew hall, where they're brewing the beer on site. There, you walk in, you can buy one, you can get, what do they call them, steins to go?
They're not growing the grain.
What's that?
They're not growing the grain, so they don't have the field, the agricultural need. That's what I'm thinking.
Right. But I don't think you're gonna, these micro ones, I don't think have the bulkness of, supply for such a niche.
Fieldage.
You know, I think when you have large producers, it's going to be supplying to a lot of different people, and they're probably going to be far away from a city setting, either in an industrial area and warehouses that are air filtered and
Their own
24/7 growing or whatever, or they're going to be, you know, somewhere, I don't know if the stuff even grows. I don't know if our season even works for this here.
Yeah, I would know.
Okay.
Okay, so we got good clarity on those issues. Buffers, this is, totally up to you. If you want buffers, you can have them. The max you can have are 1,000 feet from a school and up to 500 feet from daycare, residential treatment facility, or minor attraction areas, areas that are attracted to minors. So the map that we have there these are the maximum, right, Michael?
Correct, sir.
It's for liquor stores and bars.
What is our buffers for liquor stores and bars?
Within the zoning.
Like you're saying, liquor stores, it should be the same.
I think it's weird that you could be closer with the
You can't,
date.
I
you
don't
can't get
know.
kids in there.
I
There's
don't-
no
I don't-
advertising on these things.
I don't know how,
So Mayor and Council, Amanda Schwabe worked with our GIS staff, so these are the basic buffer areas based on the maximums by state statute.
for,
For
Schools and
parks, if you look at the,
well, that's the maximum for THC products of 1,000 feet from schools and
this is
500 from,
for any cannabis use right now. So what you're seeing is residential treatment facilities, yellow, we do have one that's out here. Daycare providers, those are the purple. So we have quite a few of those within the city limits. And then schools is that red color. And then green are park amenities where I think it's adolescents, juveniles would be using either play equipment or frequenting. So the biggest one is Quarry Lake, but it really doesn't really impact that many areas. But all the other kind of green circles are the buffer that's in the maximum in state statute. So it does leave a lot of commercial industrial area available.
you've got me all confused. The red circles indicate the current city
schools,
Schools,
buffer.
the
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
That's something we adopted, or is,
No, that's the maximum that the state has outlined.
okay.
This
So
map
this is
shows
just showing you the maximum.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
we're showing you the maximum.
So what is our current buffer for alcohol
Mayor, I do not know off the top of my
I
head.
think we have one.
and tobacco?
We don't have one for tobacco.
Okay. All right, so now the question is, do we want to have buffers from schools and what was the other stuff on the list?
Daycare,
And treatment facilities.
residential treatment facilities, and
Parks.
park amenities.
I'm just seeing why.
What's that?
Why have a buffer? What's the point?
Well, you probably don't want to put a THC
Next to a school.
place next to a treatment facility where people are trying not to use things.
Well, there's that, okay, but they can go get, if they're not going to drinking, they can go to the bar, there's a bar.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
across the
Okay.
street.
So in the schools, the kids can't get in there. Like I was saying, there's security. They have stuff at retail stores for tobacco and THC, and I don't think we have any buffers on that stuff, so I don't understand the need for a buffer.
Well, the state doesn't require us to have a
Nope.
buffer.
Yeah.
They're saying if we want to have a buffer,
That's
here's
the max.
some guidelines.
But I'm
for
saying
it.
why have a buffer?
We
Okay,
don't have to if we don't want to.
I'm putting it up for discussion.
so you're not in favor for a buffer.
why we need it.
You're fine without a buffer.
I'm still contemplating and listen to the
But
discussion.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out why.
And, I'm trying to be consistent, but with alcohol.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to buffer ourselves completely out of everything
Right.
either.
See, the one thing I'm thinking of is the old mall. Wouldn't that be a great place to put one? But there's schools right in there.
Right,
Next to
right.
The school district is right there, too.
So maybe that one I could see, but, and then you got your
Well, I
your
think
treatment
I
facility.
think it would
there,
have
too.
to be consistent.
Right, you do it all year
And
round.
that's a legal question.
You have to be consistent.
You can, so interestingly enough, the statute provides the things that you can establish buffers from with these words, but then doesn't define what those words mean. So you have the ability at this current time to decide what is a school, what is a daycare, what is a residential treatment facility, and what is a attraction in a park what is a feature in a park that's an attraction to minors. So you have a wide, and you don't have, you can do less than 1,000. You have some leeway at this point to decide what those buffers look like.
We've had this conversation about Lions Park in particular, where we have the disc golfers, and if you're out in the park, you happen to maybe smell it out there. But we also have the beautiful pool that we just spent millions of dollars on, which would be an attraction to children and families. So
Well, this
I
isn't
can see
about
the
the
argument.
use, this is about the business application.
Correct, yes.
Correct.
This is the business, yeah.
So, we're saying we're putting a business near one of those facilities that has, if we had a spot to put by
No,
Lions
Hy-Vee's
Park.
across the street,
Hy-Vee,
they
let's
sell
use
alcohol,
that.
right?
Okay. So Hy-Vee is right there by, close to a place where children will want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I could understand why,
And you've got the microbreweries across from Huber Park, right?
so, just trying to argue it.
One of the interesting points, and the mayor made it earlier, is, you know, there's when Jay, you and the mayor were talking back and forth, that, you know, alcohol sales, we have issues with, but the security, there is no real security in that. We know that these facilities are extremely secure. And so it's not really on the same level.
Facilities, the
These cannabis facilities.
more secure.
They're
than
going
that.
to have a lot of security involved with them.
And that's
It's a
required
lot
by-
more than just, you know,
Walking
hey, I look 18 or I look 21, can I buy a six-pack? Which, you know, is our problem that we face more than any other.
Are them security requirements are not from us, but from state?
State requirements.
Okay.
But it's
Yes,
still
sir.
a cash business too, right? So
Yes,
they
sir.
want to make sure that they're
Yep.
secure for other reasons,
Well, they probably don't want to lose their business.
or their money.
So it's different than other retail.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I've been debating on sharing this. If you've never been to one, you walk up to it, and then there's a lobby. You walk in. Anyone can walk into the lobby, but when you walk in, it's all walled off. There are people there that you have to show your ID. They scan it. There's like multiple checks. All the product and everything is behind closed doors, and you wait in line, and then they open the door and they usher you in. So a minor essentially could try to get in, but they're not going to see anything. They're not going to gain access because they will be stopped instantly right at the door.
So how many,
Give them your ID.
how
Yeah,
many of
and you
us,
give 'em your
how
ID.
many of us as children went to the local bar with mom and dad, and mom and dad, you sipped on mom and dad's drink? Anybody here besides me?
We're not going to stop, someone from giving it to minors.
I'm just asking.
And up until a
Are
few years ago, if you were in Wisconsin, that was perfectly legal.
These places don't allow that.
No,
No.
no. But see, I'll admit, I brought my child has gone into the liquor store with me.
Sure.
But they would not be able to go into one of these establishments
Okay.
with me. They knew no minors at all.
And so that goes to the overall discussion that Councilman Whiting brought up in regards to why buffers.
Right.
You know, this isn't like liquor, which we can kind of see a little more reasoning for buffers, but
Okay.
Makes more sense, okay.
Well, what do we think of buffers? Buffers, no buffers?
No buffers.
No,
The only
I-
argument you would push me on was the adult treatment center, but they're in there for a reason, they're adults, and,
I guess it's one way to know if you've been successful in your cure.
yeah, exactly. I would not be in favor of buffers. I don't know, I mean, it would just be for zoning purposes anyway.
I'm cured. I can go to the liquor store, bar, it doesn't bother me. I haven't drank in 20-some years.
I'm only at 5, but it still bothers me a little.
so no buffers.
No buffers.
Michael, can you bring me back up?
You have to see what I'm doing.
We better not get into one of these. I'm not kidding, Jesse.
What was this, about 5?
All right, so my presumption is, I just want to make sure, that means we don't want buffers between businesses as well?
Yeah, they can compete against each other.
Yeah, I think you're gonna get a higher quality service or product or whatever, or price wars, I guess, to, if you're battling out and the better business wins, I think.
I think we're going to be limiting, I think business is going to be limited by what space is available in the various zoning, okay? And I don't think the market is going to allow them to be successful by oversaturation.
Right.
Exactly. They might try it first.
And yeah, and I'll touch a little bit on that in a few slides from now. Okay, registration process. OCM licenses all cannabis businesses, but they must also, as I said before, register with us. We can defer to Scott County. They would be responsible for handling the registrations and compliance. If we did give them that responsibility, they would also hold them responsible for compliance checks and any city-imposed time, place, manner regulations. And in addition, they will have the ability to limit retailers if they wanted to.
I don't want the county messing with our stuff.
I kind of figured that.
I think this is what you said and is implied.
Yeah.
The only registrations are retail.
Yes, retail,
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
sorry.
Nobody
Yes,
else
yes.
has to register. That's
Yep,
just the
yep.
zoning check.
Okay,
Just
yeah.
wanted to
All
double
right,
check.
Thank you.
Thank you for
A
that.
a cultivator wouldn't have to register?
They don't have to register, but they do have to go through that first touch point of zoning
Okay,
check.
yep.
So you'll know where they are.
And we actually, just so you know, we had a discussion about this at the staff level. You know, part of us, you know, it's like, great, yeah, we wouldn't have to worry about this. But there was some concerns from our perspective. It's like, okay, well, if they're failing compliance checks, you know, do we want the county handling that? I mean, that's kind of something that we have a lot of concern about. So, you know, from a staff perspective, it was like, you know, we could have went either way, and
Look what they did with our compliance checks that went to court.
Well, I
I
looked at it from a different perspective. We pay Scott County for prosecution costs, and them costs keep going up, and if we're going to have them do our compliance checks, they're probably going to bill us for not only the compliance check, but for the prosecution cost on top of it.
we also had that discussion. Okay, we're handling it ourselves. Fees. So since we are handling it, we establish what the fees are. Up to $500 initially and $1,000 for annual renewal for cannabis retail, medical cannabis combination business, and mezzo business.
These are the maximums?
That's correct.
Okay.
Up to $125 initial and renewal for lower potency hemp retail. No fee for initial cannabis micro business, but $500 for annual renewal. And then obviously, we're not worried about Scott County at this point. So do you want registration fees? And if so, this is the max you can do.
Oh, go for the max.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to pay ourselves.
I have a question on that, too. Yeah, I'm good with the max, but it says otherwise the county would decide, establish the fee. Are they not under the same limitations?
Well, they would be.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
But they would be
We
setting
can
them
cross
and
that line
collecting
out.
them.
But
We
we're
already-
not
We're
doing
not
that,
doing
so.
that one, so.
Registration, they set and collect the fee.
Yes, correct.
They set the fee, but they have maximums like this?
That's correct.
They
Okay.
have the same max.
All right.
All right, so we will proceed in that
Is there any
direction.
reason why not to go for the max? I mean,
I see none, but I'm was
thought I'd
looking for
ask.
alternative
Well,
revenue
I'd
streams.
I think it's reasonable to assume that the cost incurred over the course of a year
It'll be
to
that.
do the compliance checks and stuff and deal with any calls of service that might come from them is going to be greater than what the maximum fee would be,
easily.
okay?
I think that that's very true.
You know, one thing that I think we missed in this whole conversation, and I apologize, but I'd like to ask the chief of police what his thoughts are on some of these things too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we certainly did it at the staff level. Jeff, come on up.
It'd be nice to know a little bit about what staff's thoughts were and if we're,
You should be asking you about the buffer zones.
Mayor, council, buffer zones, I guess the adult, treatment facilities would be one area that would be concerning. Other than that, I really don't. I know our staff doesn't want to be necessarily get the tape measure out and see how far somebody is away and from a certain spot. When it comes to compliance checks, again, as Mr. Reynolds talked about, we had a brief discussion on this, and we do alcohol and tobacco as it is now. 30% of those have failed in the last 2 years, which is concerning. So I think as far as just dealing with issues that are in Shakopee, I'd like to, we're fine keeping that and keeping those compliance checks, and kind of helps us keep our finger on the pulse, I think. You never know with the sheriff's election, a sheriff's department can change, their culture, their priorities and so forth. So I think keeping it in-house is probably the best thing, even though, yeah, it'd be nice to punt something once in a while to them,
Get it.
if I'm being honest, but this is one of those things that,
what's a reasonable buffer from a treatment facility, and then could you define a treatment facility? Would that be mental health facility? Would it be physical addiction?
Drug.
Would it be, we've got a place in Block 3 and 4 across from the brew hall that's doing some of these services. Would that be?
it would probably, mayor and council would probably be inpatient. I mean, somebody that's actually residing there.
Residential
Yeah,
treatment.
residential treatment.
Inpatient treatment, okay.
I,
What do you think?
a reasonable, I mean, you know.
I would like to include the mall in there somehow if we can, just because of the school district and their Toka, I'm going to forget the name of this.
Well, I think if you're going to have a limitation, a buffer from schools, you're going to have to be consistent
Yeah.
across the board.
Well, we cover the one. It would,
If you
but they
put a
can move.
buffer on schools, it's going to apply to all the schools, not just the
Right,
one
no,
at the
I
mall.
was just saying, but the one on the residential treatment facility would cover that facility if we made it long enough, wide enough.
Well, you can go a max of 1,000 feet,
500 if it's a residential treatment facility.
okay, and that wouldn't get you
Probably
to the
wouldn't get us
mall.
there.
So that's probably a legal question. I mean,
Okay, well, tried.
Mayor and council, if I can interject just for a second, I don't know if we're opening a can of worms here, but on the treatment side of things, but we do have a lot of sober homes, residential sober homes in this community, and you start putting buffers, there's a lot more out there than you think.
Probably true.
but we don't allow these in residential zoning.
You clip into one pretty quick.
We're not,
Yeah.
Start putting
no,
circles.
we're not allowing a retail THC business in
I'm thinking from a
residential.
buffer standpoint, you might be butting up against a few
I see.
of those places. So do you open that? We have a lot more out
Revisit
there
it.
than people
Can we
think.
revisit it for buffer zones, or is it a once and done?
You could revisit it.
Could be a zoning update
Yeah,
change.
okay.
But it would, I would say, what we propose is if you do have a buffer, we include something that says if a business is, it's kind of like a legal non-conforming use, we're trying to use that terminology. If it's there, the business is already there, you can't buffer it out by adding something
Right.
like, you shouldn't do that. That's a can of worms you don't want.
Okay, I just want to say this real quick. So, I totally respect what you just said, but what's stopping those residents from walking into a liquor store and buying alcohol where they're at now versus this product?
Good point.
So it kind of, I mean, then we got to throw it back on, they're adults, they,
And it's much more restrictive in security standpoint.
yeah. But, I mean, I suppose they wouldn't be denied entry just because they're in treatment, but it's no different than walking into Riverside Liquor and buying a bottle of Jack Daniels and drinking it around and go back to their sober living house. I mean, at the point yeah.
We can't,
Chief, what's your thoughts on how many facilities and quantity?
Mayor and Council, I think the market's going to decide that, and the reality is, there may be a number of them right away, but competition's going to weed them out, and there's just naturally, down the road on 83, there's probably going to be one that, is going to be very competitive as well. So
Yeah, and
is this as fertile a market as we think or not? I think competition and the free market will decide
they'll
how
put up
many.
And that was going to be my point when we talk about the numbers. There are a couple things to keep in mind. This is not a gold mine for micro businesses because frankly, unless you have vertical integration or you have monopoly power, you're not making a lot of money. Controlling the economies of scale is where you make your profit. And the state is basically, excise that out. Frankly, if we could have a monopoly, I would be here with a proposal talking about us doing muni weed stores and putting 4 in the city. But it's not a moneymaker.
But the state law says if you did that, it doesn't go
You-
toward the 4 that you have to allow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you can only have one. You can't have multiple businesses in the same city.
Right.
And to Jeff's, Chief Tate's point, there's going to be the Apple store of cannabis that's going to be established outside our city limits. And the fees are going to be different, and there's going to be vertical integration because they're allowed to do that, and
And the state law doesn't apply.
there's a lot of opportunities that no business in this city is going to be able to do. They are going to be the place to go to.
Our attorney has given me a funny look when I said that.
The mayor gave me a funny look no, I'm just kidding.
You guys stop it now.
Funny
You
look.
guys stop it.
How does the state rules don't apply to the sovereign nation, does it?
That's correct. The funny look was associated with an anticipated question, which was on tribal compacts that we don't know what they're going to contain yet, about tribal businesses off tribal land. But we think the rules of the city would apply in that situation. But that is yet to be seen. So that's a future question. I don't need to get into that.
But within their boundaries, the state statutes don't apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it sounds like we've heard some rumblings.
Yes.
Well, we've heard these rumblings for
I
a
thought-
while.
I thought they would have been on the bandwagon already.
So my point on number of retailers, I think the market is going to, you might have a certain amount at the beginning, but you're not going to have that at the end of the day.
It's
Force majeure.
It's just like liquor stores.
Yeah.
And so, not every community has a tribal nation right next door. And so I think that, in Scott County at least, they're going to be the place to go. And, it's going to be, it's like why, go somewhere off of Canterbury when you can go 2 miles down the road and
How do I compete with that, right?
I don't think you can.
You're a business that
I mean, that's the
But
reality.
we don't want to add any.
So there might be a chance that we don't even have anyone apply because of that
Oh, no,
potential.
I think you'll have people who
Wanna give it a
definitely
try.
are going to
To
give it a
convenience.
shot, and, everybody's seeing dollar signs, and the reality is that without economies of scale and vertical integration and monopoly, you're not going to have the money that you think you're
Well,
getting.
you might have some existing businesses, I'm thinking of the liquor stores that added the edibles or whatever, maybe a tobacco shop that added edibles. Some of these businesses might add some other things, but,
Not at the dispensary level. I don't think they can.
yeah, I don't know if they can do that or not.
They can't.
Oh, they can't. They'd have to be a
It's
standalone?
kind of like a liquor store where there's a list of approved products you can sell. The same applies to the cannabis retail location.
So if you had a tobacco store and a cigar store, you couldn't put THC products in there with the THC license?
You couldn't put what's kind of like marijuana, the high potency stuff. But things that are derived from hemp that are currently available, you could. So I like to describe it as, when I'm talking about cannabis, and the difference between cannabis and hemp is the concentration of THC in the plant. So you get the plant, then you derive the stuff from it. If the concentration is 0.3% THC or higher, it's considered cannabis under the law. And if it's lower, it's considered hemp. And if the product's derived from hemp, then it could go in the store, the tobacco store or the liquor store. If it's derived from cannabis, it has to be sold from the retail location. And so I describe it as, this is more like a liquor with a liquor store, and this is more like 3-2 beer where you could sell it at a convenience store.
And is that,
Generally.
is that the same as the Delta 8, Delta 9 on the hemp side?
Yes, and the deltas are just sort of what the THC is when it comes out of the plant. Delta 9 is the stuff that you want, the stuff that you
Psychotropic,
want,
yeah.
and it'll be in cannabis, and it's in hemp. So the Delta 9 is in both. So describing it as sort of, these are the Delta 9 products is a misnomer, but it's just in the sort of nomenclature at this point.
They need to get just one vocabulary going
I
and
know.
make this a lot easier.
Well, it doesn't help that it used to be called marijuana, now they're calling it cannabis.
Cannabis and, so number of retailers, what's your thoughts?
No limit.
I think the free market will dictate with what space might be available and the zoning that's allowed.
Yeah, I'd hate to see that empty shop just sitting there when somebody could rent it, but we've already got our 4 shops, whatever.
No, I'm saying the free market's gonna
Free market,
dictate.
yeah.
I mean, if you wanna have a retail and you have to be in this specific type of zoning and there's no space available in that zoning, you're out of luck. I mean, you're not just gonna be able to say, I'm gonna take a different kind of zoning over here because there's an empty building that I wanna use. Don't work that way. You have to meet the zoning requirements for whatever type of business that you're trying to do.
And it's interesting because I kind of thought this is where the discussion was going to go because we are an entertainment destination.
Right.
And this kind of plugs into, that designation overall. So no limitation on retail.
No, because it'll,
Free
like they
market.
said,
I think
it'll
that's a
dictate itself, it'll
self-dictated.
yeah.
It is too.
Got it.
There we go.
All right.
Yep.
So now hours of operation. Currently, they may operate from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Saturday and 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Sunday. You can restrict that from 10 to 9 every day.
How does this match our liquor operations?
Another good
I
question.
think they pay for an extra 2 a.m. for the bars anyway. It's a separate fee for
They changed that recently. Liquor stores used to close at 10 o'clock and
liquor stores, yeah.
and bars were open until 2.
They got to pay for an extra permit.
Liquor stores are 9 or 10? Okay.
10,
10, okay.
6 on Sundays.
And bars are 2 o'clock.
10 to 10. Throwing it out there. I mean, we don't have a lot of late night traffic, I don't know.
I mean, at least till 10, and the liquor stores are open till 10, if we're gonna, again, mirror.
10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Yeah.
But,
7 days
real
a
quick
month.
though, cannabis retail, so
Yes, again, this is retail.
not consumption bars or anything?
Correct.
Okay,
Micro, whatever they call
yeah,
it.
This is just your retail business.
yeah, I think it should mimic liquor,
Thinking 10 to 10.
yeah. What
10 to 10.
Anybody have a problem with that?
do you think?
Get your weed
Jay,
early.
Jim?
I don't do any of this, it's like, I feel bad. No, because I'm like, I would never be there, so it's like, I feel bad
You
for
were
the
coming
ones
down,
who
you're
are
coming for
like.
the ribbon cutting, yeah. Who's it going? Yep.
For $4.99.
All right.
All right,
The
next.
final event is events. So
Yeah,
temporary events are authorized for up to 4 days at a time.
Dang.
Process generally can follow our normal approval process for events.
Tell me about a cannabis event, Chief. How many have you been to?
There was just one.
One, I know it was in city limits, but how did it go?
They just served
Yeah.
cannabis-laced drinks at that one, I think, right? Or-
They have some.
What was it called?
Podium,
You're thinking of the spooky
Little
one,
Birds.
yeah.
What was it called?
come to the podium, please.
Who told me?
Time. Chief, go ahead.
The cannabis event, I think, that was the one at Severs, right?
Yeah, Severs.
And I did not get any feedback from the county. We would have had nothing to do with that one. I certainly didn't hear anything good, bad, or indifferent on that. I
And the
can
one we
inquire.
talked about when they first came out, that was out in Canterbury, where they just served the drinks.
Seltzers and-
And I don't think there was any issues with that one at the time. We are an entertainment.
Well, I've got a ton of questions on this one. So let's walk through a couple scenarios. So somebody's going to have this event, outdoor event, and who knows, maybe it's at the amphitheater or something like that. How do you, I mean, the process is going to have to, now you really have to figure out how to get that same security that you're getting at these micro, whatever they called it, into that event. So how do you keep these kids away from it? How do you make sure that the whatever doesn't go into residential areas impacting them? And it depends where the event is. You know, that example's probably not so good because there's not a whole lot of resident, depends which way the wind's blowing, I guess, right?
Can we do this? Oh, sorry.
So I don't know how you would, these are just things I'm
Special
thinking about.
permit.
Well, sure, but how do you address these things? I don't know
Could
how.
it be a special permit?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh, I was going to say, how is this different from sip and stroll? I mean, we're allowing people to walk, sip and stroll, so why would this be preventing on-site consumption?
You know, because this is more of a smoke that's floating through the air instead of a thing that's contained in a container.
Yeah.
So, to kind of generally answer, and I'm not an expert on these, but my understanding is, you know, a person with this event license, the cannabis event organizer, would get together a number of retailers who already are licensed with the state, have locations, doesn't have to be only in Shakopee, it can be wherever, and they'll come together for a period no longer than 4 days and be able to sell cannabis products from a designated location. They have to go through a state licensing, like, sort of process for this event. The city does not have to allow, as we read it, on-site consumption. So if you're concerned about sort of smoking at these events, you could say, you know, we'll allow you to do this through a permit, but no on-site consumption. If on-site consumption is allowed, per the statute, it has to be from a designated area where the people are only, the only people allowed in that designated area are 21. I actually don't know if everybody at the event has to be 21, but I know for certain the area in which consumption occurs, everybody must be 21.
Okay.
And this is also one of those things that the most important thing for the city to get in place, I guess sooner rather than later, I would say, is our zoning and then this registration process. Events won't occur until there are actual licenses issued, and that is not anticipated to happen until Q2 of 2025 at the earliest.
Okay, and then the other thought I had when I was thinking about events was, you know, if they had a requirement to what was the place that Severs, what'd they call that? Severs, I can't remember what they called that, but anyway, they had enough advertisement out there that any layperson reading it would know what it was. And it's like, that should almost be a requirement, because then the public knows this is what's happening. If you don't like it, stay away from it, right? I think the name gave it away on that event.
Doobie Dabbler.
I mean, the name kind of said,
Dabbler, yeah.
the name kind of implied what it was, and you know, and it was in such an area that it's so far out in the boondocks compared to anything around it that you really don't have that issue, but at least people knew what the expectation was ahead of time. If they don't want to be around it, don't go there. It's kind of self-explanatory. So I think location is going to be key. I think letting people know what's happening is going to be key. I mean, if that's what they want to do, it's fine. It's legal product, right? But you just have to make sure that you're controlling some of these other impacts.
I think we just do a special permit and we look at all the details.
Right, yeah.
Here's what popped in my mind is, like when we do the food truck festivals at the landing, if the landing allows it, you know, it's a controlled environment. You know, it's going to be advertised to know what will be going on there, so you either can go or avoid the area.
And that's what I'm saying, it's key in the advertisement part. If you say food trucks, come on down, kids' games, and you get there and it's this doobie-dazzler thing going on and a cloud of smoke, I
Right.
mean, you're going to be kind of shocked when you get there, right? So,
But that would be part of our requirements for a special permit, that the event has to be marketed as what it is.
Right,
And it cannot
right,
be
right.
construed
Like
as
full
anything else.
disclosures.
Right.
Now, that's a good question. Could we, later, as we have an event come in and want a permit, the council then can, at that time, put certain restrictions on that permit, much like we do now,
Yes,
I think
framework of what the state allows?
yeah.
So we could do this on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, every time you do something on a case-by-case basis, you open yourself up to
Right.
things.
Sure.
But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
confident that we could have sort of the parameters that outline what the levers would be.
Put the
as
framework
you
in
described.
place.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, that's where my yes is.
And council is generally concerned about exposure to those who don't want to be exposed to it, access that minors would have. You know, those have always been things that, regardless of what permit we're doing, that, you know, that they've had concern with. So that would not be different than what we normally do with
in this
with
case,
our
we
other
want to make
events.
sure that it's advertised and marketed properly.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, just like, you know, we're going to have the snowmobile races out at Canterbury or something, and you know about it well in advance.
Yeah.
And when you hear all the noise, you know what it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, would this be like a pop-up tent, like you see outside of the, our end of year, the state fair?
I thought it like tap event. You know, like the brewers come out and show off their wares. This would be, in my mind, like the.
Here you go,
we
Kursky,
just-
here's your next
You're
event.
talking about the beer demo. Is that what you're talking about?
We can have tap and toke.
Let's do one at a time here.
Tap and toke. A pop-up tent, they're selling
Toke.
cannabis, not cannabis, or THC outside of the race for Kelsey.
Full integration, done.
Your question?
At the state fair, and the main entrance, there's usually like a THC pop-up tent, like across the street over there on the left or right. Is this similar to that, or is this something?
I take the bus.
Or
in that.
similar to the
Oh,
beer dabbler.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but we can follow up on that for sure. It's
Not like
a
the
little,
fireworks tent.
I was thinking loading dock as a high schooler behind the
Right.
school.
The tent was right here, right on all the streets that go this way.
Smoking area.
It was right here.
All right, where were we?
Could we require them to, like, if there's gonna be consumption signs saying cannabis use at this event, like, so people know going there that,
I think that could be in our framework. That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
you know,
Yeah, I
have-
mean,
have
that's
a
part
sign
of what
out
we
at the
can
entrance?
do with, in conjunction with the other things that you traditionally have concerns about, that we have put in place for our registration process.
These are the requirements
events.
for a cannabis event in Shakopee.
Now, one other question for legal would be, you know, something comes before us to have one of these events, and they want to have it at a location where it's just, you know, not going to be able to keep it away from everybody else. Can we deny it for specific reasons?
yes, you can put sort of reasonable restrictions on where these events could occur. My recommendation would just be, like we're doing now, consider what those parameters might be, put them in the ordinance, and then, you know, just make sure it's, I love talking about levers. It's the levers that you then could pull to ensure that the impacts are minimized as you're looking to minimize them.
I'm thinking a tent in a parking lot event of a business strip mall next to a bunch of residential where you're saying, you know what?
What if we carved it out as major recreation only? Is that going to limit us too much?
Well, yeah, you are limiting because you might have, like you had with the Sears, which was out in the middle of an agricultural area.
We
So,
don't have a lot of that.
no, well, you get some out in the townships and stuff. So I think if we have the things that we've already talked about, that covers quite a bit. And if staff isn't comfortable with what's being proposed, meeting them levers, they can certainly point it out and we can deny it for them reasons.
All right, we're going to draft an ordinance now based upon initial draft on your responses. I'm going to run through those responses now, just so we all understand where we are.
Before you do that, do you have
Yes, sir.
any concerns with where we're at on this as a council?
Concerns?
You guys over there? No? All right. Legal?
No concerns.
Geez, we're doing pretty good, council.
All right, so here is what I believe where we are. First of all, we're going to rely on our normal business use for zoning. We will not require buffers. We will decline having Scott County participate. We will do the max allowed fees. We will not limit retailers. Our hours of operation will be limited from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And for events, we're going to typically look at those things that council has traditionally looked at, including advertisements, making sure people know what the event is, restriction from minor consumption or possession of it, and then trying to make sure that it's not adversely impacting others who do not want to be impacted by it. Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
All right, well, the legal team will draft an ordinance that kind of takes all of that into consideration. We will bring that forward. It will have to go through our normal ordinance process, our normal ordinance notice. So we will, first of all, get it in front of you so you can discuss it and say, this is what we want. And then we'll put all that together and then have it in place.
Is this something we want to do a public hearing on, or have some input?
I'm looking at him.
If there are any changes to the zoning code, you would have to, but if we're not changing anything in the zoning code, it's not necessary.
Thought of it.
Well, we're changing the zoning code by adding a whole new set of uses.
We'll have to take a look at zoning. It may not need to be, since the retail is going to follow, or all the businesses are going to follow our normal code.
Right.
It may not need to, but
Okay.
we will check on that to be sure.
Do you want to have a public hearing on it?
I don't know. I wouldn't mind having some input from the community on something like this, but sometimes that gets out of hand. I think we're
Well,
on
I
the right
mean-
track. What we're thought, but we could be really off base.
I'm open either way. If we want to have a community discussion on it, that's fine. But the bottom line is that the state has legalized this, and they have made it so that we cannot ban it. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
We're opening up the can of worms.
Yep, we are.
You know, if they can come before us in droves and say, ban it, and we're not allowed to. If they really want that, they're going to have to take it up with their state legislators.
Let's see how it rolls out, and if what we came up with is upsetting the people, we can always change it.
True.
Yep.
Can't ban it.
Well, we can't ban
Ban
it,
it,
but
but
we can
yeah.
make adjustments.
Add buffers at
All right, well, thank you all very much for your input and discussion. I think we've got a good idea of what to start with, and you will see it again in the future.
That was very productive.
Thank you all.
Okay, so that brings us to 13A, city bill list.
Nothing for
No
me.
questions.
Me neither.
Oh, nothing here, no.
13B, liaison administration. What end I think we're on this side.
Sure. So I had one event this past Saturday. I attended the grand opening and ribbon cutting for our new restaurant in town, Soy 21. That's over in the Southbridge area next to Panera. It's a Hmong Thai Asian fusion restaurant, and it's really cool inside. So and what we sampled was good. So I'd recommend everyone to check it out.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor. For me, just the same thing. I was over at Soy 21, which soy means alley, which kind of, and 21 because it's on County Road 21. So it was the closest word they have, this, she said. She was telling me the story of how they chose Soy 21, so alley 21, County Road 21. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I believe it's Hmong food.
Yep.
So, and yes, the sampling of food was delicious, so I encourage everyone to stop by and visit.
All right.
And then my scale meeting will be this Friday.
All righty. Jay?
I have nothing to report. The election was last night. I want to thank all of those people that ran. Congratulations to Mr. Lara, and
You as well.
thank you. Appreciate that, and everybody that ran. Good turnout this year, so thank you. That's all I
Mr.
have.
Delaney?
You also attended the grand opening at Soy 21 Asian Bistro and Bar. We had a SPUC workshop where we included our discussion on rates, looking at future capital investments, and pretty much planning for those. Also attended a commercial railroad discussion of various lines. That was actually interesting. I did that on behalf of the 169 Coalition to find out more about that. And do we have cleanup day? Was that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cleanup day.
Almost didn't miss that one.
We all did, sorry.
I think most everybody in here was there. Cleanup day, always a great time to talk to residents, and so.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right, thank you. My report, October 18th, I met with a lady here at City Hall about Hockey Day Minnesota. She does not represent Shakopee hockey. She was just a resident asking. And her thoughts and comments were, why is the city not, front and center on this, taking leadership role in it? And I mean, we had a good conversation about it, and my response was, this is not a Shakopee event, and the people that should be recognized for this event are the Shakopee Hockey Association, Valley Fair, the Wild, and Hockey Day Minnesota. This is their event. They're the ones that should be being recognized for their efforts. And the city, will do what we do for any other organization that we have in Shakopee, whether it's like the soccer clubs and stuff. But we don't, this is not us to be patted on our back, because this is not our event. This is theirs. I told them I'd be more than willing to put their information out if they want to put it together and send it to me, so I haven't received that. I'm sure as we get closer, we'll get that information and we'll get it out. And it's a great event, obviously, but like I said, this is their event, and we shouldn't be taking a spotlight away from those that are responsible for putting it together. They deserve that for their efforts.
We are spreading the word about it. It actually is one of our cover stories for our next Shakopee Snapshot, and I just reviewed that today. It's a great story, and yeah, it's.
Yep. Let's see, October 22nd, St. Francis ribbon cutting and tour for the Outpatient Surgery Center, TRIA. I had the extensive tour by the guy that's responsible for meeting all the various requirements in that field for that building. And boy, great tour guide, because he knew everything about everything. Pretty cool to have that. I mean, I go back in time when the hospital was in town here. It was small and it was, pretty limited. And now you look at it and it's different location, campus. It's got all kinds of different stuff where you've got the hospital, the emergency room, the urgent care, the inpatient stuff, and now you got the outpatient surgery center. Just a lot of great amenities for not only Shakopee, but the larger area around us. November 6th today, it's earlier today, the Emblem Apartment Complex out on 17th Avenue by 83. Cool office space. What's it have? A pool, grill area, weight room. Doggy park for the residents. They got one system that takes the cards that you'd use for your apartment, can also get you into the pool area outside or through the front doors of the office space for the members, and that system is able to differentiate between what you're, if you bought the garage space or whatever, you can use a garage. If you didn't, you can't. So it's a pretty sophisticated system. It's pretty cool. New stuff is always nice and new. What did they say, 288 maybe, something like that? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, market rate, and I think the 1 bedroom, when I asked, was $1,450 maybe, I think they said. Not too bad considering the housing prices, right? I think that's all I have, and yes?
I thought of one thing. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. About the election, I wanted to make sure we thanked our election judges, and that's what I forgot. So they put in a long day yesterday, and we have some great election judges, and we want them back. We appreciate their work, and I just wanted to get him a thank you.
And
And
I-
our city clerk.
I had,
City clerk, yeah, well, definitely.
see, I had that written down right here.
Okay, good.
Right? Yeah, that was going to be my last thing, that
Okay.
our election staff and clerk's office. I know that, Renee and I, we helped her parents and stuff at one location, and then we went ourselves. Very smooth considering the turnout. I was pleasantly surprised at how smooth it went. And every year I have the same great experience of walking up to and this year it was a younger person, and they asked for the first three of my first name and the first three of my last name. And when they got my name, she looked at me with a blank stare like, what do I do now? And I said, it's okay. There's two of me. Look at the date of birth. One is my son. So I'll be his age right now. But very, very good flow. They did some things a little bit different. They had the tape on the floors and stuff. Did you notice that?
I voted here.
Where they had spaces and like little trails and stuff. It was awesome. So kudos to the election staff. Make sure they get that information. I thought that was pretty darn good how they did that. So it went very smooth. Yeah. Mr. Reynolds, your report, sir?
I have nothing to report. I appreciate council allowing me to go away for a month. It was very much appreciated. Thank you.
Chelsea? Nothing? You
Nothing
good?
to report, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other business? Mr. Whiting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Friday, November 15th at 4 PM for the canvassing of the election results.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion?
None.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.